Good evening, everyone. I want to begin by acknowledging something that's often hard to admit. We can be our own biggest obstacle. I know that might sound harsh, but stick with me for a moment. We all have dreams, goals, and aspirations, right? Yet, despite our best efforts, we sometimes find ourselves paralyzed by fear, doubt, and perfectionism. We get in our own way, and we let that silence the voice inside of us that believes we're capable of more. We often think of obstacles as external forces, things, or people standing in our way. But one of the most powerful truths we need to face is that we can be our own biggest obstacle. We create our own barriers, sometimes without even realizing it. And in doing so, we prevent ourselves from reaching our fullest potential. The first step in overcoming this is acknowledging that we're the ones holding ourselves back. Self-sabotage can be subtle, showing up in ways that are hard to recognize. It can look like procrastination, a constant need to be perfect, or even overthinking every decision until we're paralyzed by doubt. We often think we're just trying to avoid failure, but the reality is we're so afraid of stepping outside our comfort zones that we prevent ourselves from taking any action at all. We tell ourselves that we're not ready, that we don't have enough experience, or that we need more time. The truth is, we're simply making excuses to keep ourselves from doing the very thing that will help us grow. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that the barriers we face are always out of our control. We look at our circumstances and think, if only I had more time, or if only I had the right connections, or if only I were more confident. But these aren't the real barriers. The real obstacle is the voice inside us that tells us we're not good enough, that we're not deserving of success, or that we'll never be able to handle the challenges that come with pursuing our dreams. That voice is powerful, and it can hold us captive if we let it. We believe its lies because they are familiar, and they give us an easy out. It's easier to stay in our comfort zone and avoid taking risks than it is to confront those feelings of inadequacy and push through them. But the longer we listen to that voice, the more we reinforce its power over us. It's important to recognize that this voice isn't reality. It's not an objective truth. It's just a collection of fears, insecurities, and past experiences that we've allowed to define us. It's the voice of self-doubt that keeps us from taking action, trying new things, or pushing beyond what we've already achieved. It's the voice that convinces us that failure is the end rather than a step toward growth. And while it's natural to feel fear when we step into something new, we have to realize that fear doesn't have to dictate our actions. This is where the power of self-awareness comes in. By recognizing the ways in which we hold ourselves back, we can start to break free from these patterns. Self-sabotage thrives in the shadows, in the places we don't want to look. But once we shine a light on it, we can begin to understand why we act the way we do and how to shift our mindset. It's about being honest with ourselves, acknowledging that sometimes we're the ones standing in our own way. The truth is, we are often our harshest critics. We judge ourselves more severely than we would ever judge others. We hold ourselves to unrealistic standards and then wonder why we can't meet them. We fail to recognize that progress isn't linear and that perfection is a myth. Life is messy and growth is messy. When we demand perfection from ourselves, we set ourselves up for disappointment and failure before we even begin. But when we acknowledge that we are the ones getting in our own way, we can start to shift our perspective. Instead of looking at ourselves as failures, we can start to see the areas where we've been limiting our growth. And we can begin to ask ourselves, what would it look like if I stopped holding back? What would it feel like if I embraced the messiness of growth? The first step in breaking free from self-sabotage is to be willing to take action, even when it feels uncomfortable. Even when that voice of doubt is screaming in your ear, you can choose to take one small step forward. And with each step, the grip of self-sabotage loosens, and you begin to realize that the only thing standing in your way is you. We all tell ourselves stories. Some of them are small, almost subconscious, like the way we describe our day to a friend. Others are deeper, more ingrained beliefs about who we are, what we deserve, and what we're capable of achieving. These stories shape our reality. The problem is that many of the stories we tell ourselves are limiting, and we don't always question whether they're true. We get caught up in the narrative we've created, believing it's the only possible version of who we are or what we can accomplish. One of the most powerful things we can do to stop getting in our own way is to challenge the stories we've been telling ourselves. Too often, we're guided by a story that doesn't serve us. We have this internal narrative that says we're not good enough, that we don't belong, or that we'll fail if we try. These stories, even though they feel true, are not facts. They are just perceptions that we've shaped over time. often based on our fears, our insecurities, or past experiences. And while these stories might seem comforting in their familiarity, they keep us stuck in a loop of self-doubt and inaction. The truth is, most of these stories come from old wounds, events from our past that left us feeling inadequate, rejected, or hurt in some way. Maybe we were told we weren't capable, or perhaps we failed at something important to us and decided that failure was an indication of our worth. Over time, these experiences can turn into deeply held beliefs that shape the way we see ourselves in the world. They lead us to make assumptions about what's possible, and we often carry them with us long after the original event has passed. In many ways, we become the story we tell ourselves, even if it's not a true reflection of who we are. When we buy into these limiting stories, we become paralyzed. We start to believe that success is something out of our reach, or that we're destined to fail before we even begin. We don't try new things because we think we'll just mess them up, or we talk ourselves out of pursuing goals because we assume we don't have the skills or qualifications. We trap ourselves in this cycle of self-criticism, where the voices in our head continue to tell us that we're not enough. The more we repeat these stories, the more ingrained they become, and before we know it, they shape every decision we make. One of the most important things we can do is recognize that we don't have to accept these stories as truth. We are not bound by the limitations we place on ourselves. Our past does not define us. In fact, the stories we've been telling ourselves can be rewritten. We can start to reframe the narrative and take control of the way we perceive ourselves. Instead of seeing ourselves as failures or unworthy, we can choose to view ourselves as capable of growth and change. We can rewrite the story that says we're not enough and replace it with one that says we are worthy, we are capable, and we are deserving of success and fulfillment. This is not about ignoring the reality of challenges or pretending that things will always be easy. It's about shifting our mindset so that we no longer let the fear of failure dictate our actions. It's about giving ourselves permission to try, to take risks, and to learn from our mistakes. When we change the way we think about ourselves and our potential, we change the way we act, and that change can be profound. To rewrite our stories, we need to confront the limiting beliefs that hold us back. We need to ask ourselves, where do these beliefs come from? Are they really true? And most importantly, what is the impact of believing these stories on our lives? By questioning these assumptions, we begin to see how much power we've given to them. When we realize that these stories are not absolute truths, we can begin to take the necessary steps to change them. The process of rewriting our stories takes time, and it's not always easy. But it is incredibly liberating. It frees us from the grip of self-doubt and opens up the possibility for new, empowering stories that propel us forward. The stories we tell ourselves have the power to shape our future, and by choosing to tell a different, more supportive story, we can create the life we desire. Vulnerability is one of the most misunderstood and often avoided aspects of being human. We associate vulnerability with weakness, fragility, and exposure to harm. Many of us are taught from an early age to hide our vulnerabilities, to shield ourselves from judgment, rejection, and criticism. But the reality is, vulnerability is the source of strength, courage, and growth. It is in our vulnerability that we find the ability to connect with others, to embrace change, and to step into the fullness of our potential. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we give ourselves permission to be seen not just in our strengths, but in our imperfections and uncertainties. We stop pretending to have it all together and start showing up as our authentic selves. This can be terrifying. The fear of judgment, of being misunderstood or failing publicly is real. But what we often fail to realize is that when we hide our vulnerabilities, we also hide the very aspects of ourselves that make us truly human. In doing so, we rob ourselves of the connection and growth that come from embracing vulnerability. Being vulnerable doesn't mean exposing every detail of our lives or laying ourselves bare for the world to see. It means allowing ourselves to show up honestly with the understanding that we may not have all the answers and we may not be perfect. It means acknowledging our fears and insecurities without letting them control us. Vulnerability is the willingness to face the unknown, to try something new, even when we don't know if we'll succeed. It is choosing to take risks and lean into discomfort rather than retreating into the safety of what is familiar. The truth is, vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, but a testament to our strength. It takes immense courage to step into situations where we have no guarantee of success, where we are open to failure, rejection, or disappointment. Yet, it is in these moments that we learn the most about ourselves. It is through vulnerability that we develop resilience, because every time we face a challenge or fall short of our expectations, we learn how to get back up and keep going. It is through vulnerability that we build the emotional strength to handle life's inevitable ups and downs, knowing that we are capable of navigating them even when things don't go as planned. When we avoid vulnerability, we also avoid growth. Growth requires stepping outside of our comfort zones, and that means embracing the possibility of failure, uncertainty, and change. If we stay in the safety of what we know, we limit our potential. We don't give ourselves the opportunity to stretch, to learn, or to evolve. By avoiding vulnerability, we also avoid the very experiences that allow us to reach new heights and discover what we are truly capable of. In fact, vulnerability is the birthplace of creativity, innovation, and joy. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we open ourselves up to new ideas, new experiences, and new ways of thinking. It is through vulnerability that we connect with others in meaningful ways, because it is our shared human experiences, our struggles, our fears, and our triumphs that create authentic connections. By being vulnerable, we give others permission to do the same, creating a ripple effect of authenticity, courage, and understanding. Vulnerability is what allows us to truly be seen and to see others for who they really are. Choosing vulnerability is not easy. It takes practice and requires us to confront the fears and doubts that have held us back. It requires us to be willing to make mistakes, to fail, and to try again. But when we allow ourselves to embrace vulnerability, we free ourselves from the limitations we've placed on our growth. We stop holding ourselves back out of fear of failure, and instead we lean into the discomfort of uncertainty, knowing that it is through this discomfort that we will grow stronger and more resilient. The more we embrace vulnerability, the more we realize that it is not something to fear, but something to be celebrated. It is through vulnerability that we connect with the world in a way that is deep, real, and meaningful. When we stop hiding behind the walls of perfection and self-protection, we open ourselves up to the richness of life, with all its messiness, beauty, and possibility. Vulnerability allows us to live fully and authentically, and in doing so, it enables us to experience the joy and fulfillment that come with truly being ourselves. The idea of perfection can be so deeply ingrained in our minds that we often don't even realize how much we're driven by it. We strive for perfection in our work, in our relationships, and in ourselves, believing that if we can just get everything right, we'll find success and happiness. Yet this constant pursuit of perfection often holds us back more than it helps us. It paralyzes us, keeps us stuck in a cycle of self-doubt, and prevents us from taking the very actions that could lead to growth and fulfillment. The truth is, perfection is an illusion. It's an unrealistic standard that we set for ourselves, one that is not only impossible to achieve, but also unnecessary for living a fulfilling life. No one is perfect and no situation is flawless. We all have flaws, make mistakes, and experience setbacks. In fact, it is often in these very imperfections that we learn the most about ourselves and the world around us. It's the mistakes, the failures, the moments of uncertainty that push us to grow, to learn, and to become more resilient. Yet when we're driven by perfection, we often find ourselves hesitating. We wait for the right moment or for everything to align perfectly before taking action. We're so afraid of making mistakes, of not measuring up, or falling short that we delay starting altogether. We tell ourselves that we're not ready yet, that we need to prepare more or wait until everything is just right. But the truth is, there will never be a perfect moment. There will never be a time when all the stars align and everything falls into place. And if we wait for that moment, we risk never moving forward at all. The desire for perfection also breeds self-criticism. When we don't live up to the ideal we set for ourselves, we beat ourselves up thinking that we're not good enough or that we failed in some fundamental way. This self-criticism can be crippling, leaving us feeling unworthy and incapable of moving forward. We start to define ourselves by our perceived shortcomings rather than recognizing that growth comes from taking action and learning through experience. Instead of letting perfection paralyze us, we can choose to embrace imperfection as a part of the process. Growth doesn't happen in a straight line, and it certainly doesn't happen in a perfect environment. The messiness of life, the trial and error, the setbacks, and the bumps along the way are what make the journey worthwhile. When we let go of the need for everything to be perfect, we free ourselves to take risks, to make mistakes, and to learn along the way. We give ourselves permission to be human, to be imperfect, and to still move forward despite the fear of not measuring up. Perfectionism also leads us to focus on the end goal, often overlooking the value of the journey itself. We become so obsessed with the outcome that we forget to appreciate the small wins, the lessons learned, and the growth we experience in the process. When we stop chasing perfection, we can start to enjoy the ride, the progress, the learning, and the moments of joy and discovery along the way. Life is not about achieving a flawless end result. It's about engaging in the experience, taking it all in, and finding meaning in each step we take. Letting go of perfection means choosing to take action even when things aren't perfect. It means putting ourselves out there, trying new things, and accepting that failure part of the process. Perfection isn't necessary for success. What matters is the willingness to keep going, to keep trying, and to keep growing. Every small step forward, every mistake, and every failure is an opportunity to learn and evolve. When we accept imperfection as part of the journey, we begin to realize that it is not perfection that leads to success, but persistence, resilience, and the courage to keep moving, even when things are messy. In our desire for perfection, we often hold ourselves to standards that are not only unrealistic, but also harmful. We deny ourselves the freedom to make mistakes, to grow, and to fully engage in life. By letting go of perfection, we open ourselves up to a world of possibilities. We stop limiting ourselves by what we think we should be and instead embrace who we are, imperfect, evolving, and capable of so much more than we give ourselves credit for. Letting go of perfection allows us to embrace our humanity, to take risks, and to show up fully in our lives, even when it's not perfect. And in doing so, we create the space for real growth, fulfillment, and joy. Failure is often seen as something to avoid at all costs. We are conditioned to fear fearty as the end of the road, as a reflection of our inadequacy or inability to succeed. We think of failure as something that happens when we're not good enough, something that we should be ashamed of, and something that should be hidden or ignored. However, failure is not our enemy. It's an essential part of the process of growth and achievement. It's through failure that we learn, adapt, and ultimately succeed. The problem is that most of us see failure as a final verdict rather than as a step in a larger journey. We are afraid that if we fail, we will be judged, criticized, or even rejected. This fear of failure often keeps us from taking risks, from stepping outside our comfort zones, and from trying new things. We become paralyzed by the possibility of not succeeding, and in doing so, we prevent ourselves from moving forward. We let the fear of failure hold us back from reaching our full potential. The truth is, no one is immune to failure. Every single person, no matter how successful they may seem, has faced failure at some point. What sets successful people apart is not that they have never failed, but that they have learned how to deal with failure and use it as a stepping stone to greater things. Failure is not a sign that we are not good enough or that we are destined to fail forever. It's simply feedback, a message that tells us where we need to adjust, what we need to learn, and how we can improve. It's an opportunity to course correct and to refine our approach. One of the biggest mistakes we make when we fail is to personalize it. We think that failure reflects something intrinsic about us, that we are not capable, not worthy, or not deserving of success. But failure is not who we are. It's simply a result of taking a risk, trying something new, or stepping outside of our comfort zone. It doesn't define us. It is a momentary setback, not a permanent condition. When we stop seeing failure as something to be avoided, instead view it as a necessary part of the learning process, we begin to shift our perspective. We start to see failure as a teacher rather than a punishment. We realize that without failure, there is no growth. Every time we try and fail, we gain valuable experience. We learn what works and what isn't, and that knowledge helps us improve. Failure shows us where we can refine our skills, change our approach, or pivot in a new direction. It forces us to stretch beyond our limits and discover new strengths and capabilities that we didn't know we had. Failure also teaches us resilience. It shows us that we can recover, adapt, and keep going even after things don't go as planned. When we experience failure and continue to push forward, we build emotional strength and fortitude. We learn how to handle setbacks and disappointment, how to pick ourselves up and try again, and how to stay committed to our goals despite the challenges. This resilience is what ultimately leads to success, not avoiding failure, but learning how to rise stronger each time we face it. In our culture, we often idealize success and look at failure as something shameful or embarrassing. But in reality, failure is a normal and necessary part of life. It's something that every successful person has encountered. The key is not avoiding failure, but embracing it as part of the process. When we do, we allow ourselves the freedom to take risks, to learn from our mistakes, and to grow. It's important to recognize that failure is not the opposite of success, it's a part of it. Every successful endeavor involves some level of failure. When we stop fearing failure and start accepting it As a natural part of the journey, we open ourselves up to new possibilities. We allow ourselves to try, to experiment, and to learn without being paralyzed by the fear of not succeeding. We begin to see failure as an opportunity for growth rather than something to avoid at all costs. By shifting our relationship with failure, we begin to change how we approach challenges. We take risks, knowing that failure is not the end of the world, but a stepping stone to something greater. We stop judging ourselves when things don't go as planned, and instead, we use those experiences as fuel for future growth. Failure becomes not a roadblock, but a catalyst for success. And in doing so, we give ourselves the freedom to achieve, to grow, and to reach our full potential. Stepping into your worth and potential is one of the most transformative shifts you can make in your life. Many of us walk through life with an underlying sense of inadequacy, believing that we are not enough or that we don't deserve to pursue our dreams. We carry around feelings of unworthiness, often without even realizing it, and allow those feelings to dictate the choices we make and the actions we take. When we fail to recognize our own value, we inadvertently block ourselves from reaching the success and fulfillment we are capable of achieving. Stepping into your worth is not just about acknowledging your strengths, but also about recognizing the power that comes from embracing who you are, flaws and all. The first step in stepping into your worth is to recognize the stories you've been telling yourself about your abilities and your value. So often we internalize negative messages from others or from our past experiences, and we let those messages define us. We tell ourselves that we're not smart enough, not talented enough, or not worthy of love, success, or happiness. These stories are often based on things we've been told or things we believed about ourselves for so long that we've accepted them as truth. But they are not the truth. The truth is that you are worthy, deserving, and capable of achieving everything you desire. The moment you start to question those limiting beliefs is the moment you begin to reclaim your power. One of the reasons we struggle to step into our worth is because of fear. We fear failure, we fear rejection, and we fear the unknown. We've been conditioned to believe that stepping up and taking ownership of our potential means putting ourselves at risk of embarrassment or disappointment. This fear can hold us back from taking the very actions that will allow us to grow and succeed. We hide behind perfectionism, waiting for the right time or the perfect set of circumstances before we take action. But the reality is that there is no perfect time. The time to step into your worth is now, even if it's messy, uncertain, or imperfect. The longer you wait, the longer you deny yourself the opportunity to experience the life you deserve. Another key element in stepping into your worth is learning to value yourself, even when others don't. It's easy to seek validation from external sources, our peers, our families, our bosses. But the truth is that no one can validate you the way you can validate yourself. When we rely too heavily on others to affirm our worth, we give them power over our sense of self. But when we choose to believe in our own value regardless of external opinions, we regain control over our lives. This doesn't mean that we should disregard the opinions of others entirely, but rather that we should no longer base our self-worth on their approval. You are worthy regardless of what anyone else thinks, and once you truly internalize that belief, you can begin to live your life authentically and without fear. Stepping into your worth also means accepting that you don't have to be perfect to be worthy. So many of us spend our lives striving for an idealized version of ourselves, thinking that only when we've achieved perfection will we be deserving of success and happiness. But the truth is that perfection is a myth. It's an unattainable standard that only serves to keep us stuck in self-doubt and self-criticism. Your worth isn't based on your achievements or your flaws, it's inherent in who you are as a person. When you learn to embrace your imperfections, you free yourself from the need to measure up to some external standard. You allow yourself to show up as you are, flaws and all, knowing that you are still worthy of love, respect, and success. To truly step into your worth, you must also be willing to take risks. Stepping into your potential requires vulnerability, courage, and the willingness to fail. It's about moving beyond the comfort of what you know and stepping into the unknown. It means trusting that you are capable even when the path ahead is unclear. It's easy to stay in our comfort zones where we feel safe and secure, but nothing new ever comes from staying in the same place. In order to grow and unlock your potential, you must be willing to take action even when you don't have all the answers. Each step you take, no matter how small, is an affirmation of your worth and a declaration that you believe in your own ability to succeed. Finally, stepping into your worth means acknowledging that you are deserving of all the good things life has to offer. It's about believing that you are worthy of success, love, joy, and fulfillment, not because you are perfect, but because you are enough as you are. When you step into your worth, you stop settling for less than you deserve. You begin to set boundaries that protect your time, energy, and well-being. You start saying yes to opportunities that align with your values and goals, and no to things that drain you or hold you back. Stepping into your worth means living in alignment with your true self and creating a life that reflects the value you place on yourself. Stepping into your worth is a powerful journey of self-discovery and growth. It's about shedding the limiting beliefs that hold you back, embracing vulnerability, and letting go of the fear of failure. When you recognize your inherent value and stop waiting for perfection, you unlock your true potential. You no longer seek validation from others, but instead trust in your own abilities and worth. By taking risks, embracing imperfection, and believing in yourself, you open the door to limitless opportunities and a life of fulfillment. The time to step into your worth is now, because you are more than enough.